Hello, my name is David Martinez, and today we're going to talk about how being open to chance encounters can enrich your cultural experience abroad. Well, Todd, thanks so much for joining me. You are CEO of Travel
I
Oregon,
am.
which in your role, you travel all over the world. Do you have how many countries have you been to? Let's start with the
I
question that you
have
get asked all the
I
time.
have no clue.
I love that
I have
answer.
no
Why
idea.
not? You've never sat
I
in front
don't
of a
count.
map and counted the
I don't
countries?
count. I don't count.
What do
Yeah.
you, what do you have against counting countries?
I I don't. I suppose it's no different than the folks that own the RVs and they like to get a sticker for every state they've traveled through and complete, it's just it adds to the adventure for them and other people are into that. It's never been about that for for me. I just realized after a trip to Rwanda last fall, it was like, oh, I've been on every continent now but Antarctica. But it wasn't a goal. It just
Just
happened
happened that way.
organically. And it
Yeah.
was like, oh.
I love
So
that answer. It's frequently I get asked this question all the time. How many countries have you been? And in my role, there's kind of this persona. I bring an experience, an array of
mhm.
travel, and so forth. But it's a little painful when I get asked that question because it's kind of like, how do you say a number without it being meaningless? And so I love that answer. But you have traveled to numerous different countries.
I have.
Is there, what's the go-to answer? Where should I go? Or do you have like a favorite experience, location?
Well, because we're talking about the world, I can answer that question. As a tourism director for the state of Oregon,
You have to say Oregon.
if you were to ask me what my favorite places in Oregon were, I'd have to say all tourism directors love all their children the same. So we have no favorites, right?
That's not real though. You must have your favorite spots in
Never to be
Oregon.
revealed on a podcast that's public. But talking about places in the world, there are places that are special to me, and they're usually because of the emotion that's tied to the place, the memories that are tied to the place. Even on business trips, there could be memories and emotions that are
Mhm.
tied to places. So Japan is very special to me.
Okay.
Japan is a place that I traveled. It was my first business trip when I came to work for the state of Oregon back in 1994. I was doing the international marketing program for the state tourism office at the time. So it was my job to promote Oregon
To
internationally.
Japan specifically.
And Japan was my specific first trip. I'd been on the job about 2 weeks and was able to rush my passport and go.
What's the connection between
So
Oregon and Japan? I don't
oh
know.
my gosh, there are many. We have a very long and cherished relationship with Japan. We have the second oldest consulate
Okay.
in Oregon. There are a number of Japanese corporations that are located here in Oregon, well over 100
Oh wow.
different Japanese
I don't think I
businesses
knew
that
that.
are located here. We've had nonstop air service between uh, Portland and Tokyo since the 80s. Used to be a weekly flight on United and then Northwest and then Delta,
Mhm.
or excuse me, Delta and then Northwest and then Delta again,
Okay.
because of the merger, came in and started running the nonstops. So it's there are numerous Shugaku Ryoko programs, which are the end of the year school trip programs for high school and junior high students to travel to Oregon, usually several hundred at a time, coming here for homestay experiences. So there are many, many connections between
Wow.
Oregon and Japan.
That's fantastic. All right, so you go to Japan in 1994. This is
Yeah,
your first time
first
going.
time, first time.
And how was that experience?
It was great. Loved it. Fairly quick trip by some standards because it was all of 5 days and we were in Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya.
For 5
Um,
days in those 3 cities?
yeah, 5 days, those three
Wow,
cities because
okay.
you've got travel time,
Sure.
obviously, in between. But it was just hard and fast business the whole time, except in the evenings when you were going out for amazing food,
Yeah.
And I do love Japanese food. Love sushi, love sashimi, love tempura, love fill in the blanks.
Yeah, yeah. The steak,
So
what's the steak called? Wagyu? Wagyu?
Wagyu,
Wagyu
Wagyu,
steak. Amazing.
the Wagyu steak, for the Kobe beef, the Kobe Wagyu.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then the different ways that the food can be prepared. So, you know, yakitori versus kaiseki,
Yeah,
and where the food is almost like art,
yeah.
and it's Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
It
agree.
was just
I used to always say, people ask me, what's the best food you've had? And I had this list, top three, and I've said this before on this podcast. I'll say it again: Spain, Peru, and South Korea were kind of the top three, and I don't know what order, right? I have to say
mhm.
Spain because I'm from Spain. But when I went to Japan recently, I started to rethink my list, and now I have to say top four because Japan is definitely up there as well.
Yeah.
So I would agree with that.
Yeah. My on my list for Japan, yet to be experienced, but on a trip that I had to Fukuoka one time in Western Japan, I found out that this is where the puffer fish is very popular, but it's seasonal and it's poisonous. And so if you don't remove a certain gland before you eat it, it can
It can
make you
kill you.
very, very sick, but actually it could kill you.
Okay.
And
And wait, just to
so
be clear, are you the one removing this gland, or do they remove it
they
for you?
remove it for you, and the
Okay.
chefs actually have to go through this training and certification program. So only certain chefs are certified to be able to prepare the fugu, as it's called,
Okay.
for you to be able to enjoy. And that is still on my list. My
Okay.
wife does not know why I would ever want to do that, and it's like because I can. I really, So.
Are we trying to
Um,
bring this here to Oregon as well?
I
Is
don't,
this part of the
I, I don't
what
know. We do,
what are the
we,
laws and restrictions
yeah,
for poisonous?
yeah, we do have Japanese sake that's being made here. I don't know if we have the opportunity to do aquaponics with fugu. I don't know. So,
We gotta get on
yeah.
that. On these trips that you take, I know it's a business trip, but for me, as when I went to Japan recently, I was there on a site visit, but I tacked on a couple of days at the end of it, and I went to Kyoto, and it was a way to combine, because it's exhausting. It's really, really tiring to go on these trips. And then also a little frustrating to say, I was in this country, but it was all business. I want to experience some of the culture. I want
Mhm.
to, eat the food. I want to see something. I want to meet people. Do you tag on a couple of days sometimes? Do you get to do some fun stuff on these trips, or is it all business?
It's when I go, it is all business, and unless we happen to be there over a weekend
Okay.
because everything is closed. So, we've had experiences where, for example, we've had a 10-day sales mission to Japan. Obviously, there's a weekend in between. So, what are we going to choose to do during the weekend? And we'll want to do something that we will refer to as a cultural immersion because the better we know that culture, the better we're going to be able to position Oregon to them.
So it's a
You know?
combination then. It's a part of your role. You can justify, because you're saying this is going to help me better sell,
Yeah,
right? But at the same time, you get that cultural immersion.
exactly.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that you've done this in Japan?
Yeah,
Or
yeah. In fact, probably one of my favorite cultural immersions, what became almost an immersion by accident, was
I
we
love the
were,
way this
yeah,
starts.
yeah,
These
we were,
accidental
we
encounters.
were we were launching new air service, nonstop air service between Portland, Oregon, and Fukuoka.
Okay. Where
And
is Fukuoka? Just
Fukuoka is Western
okay.
Japan, south and west.
Okay.
And when we were when we were there, we were all flying home on a Saturday, and the flights are like at 7 p.m. So I have all day Saturday. And on the flight over, I was reading in the Delta In-Flight magazine about this festival that was happening in a little fishing village called Karatsu. And it's called the Kunchi Festival. And it's about an hour outside of Fukuoka. And it's like, I can do this. I've been to Japan. By this time, I'd been to Japan probably 20 times. And I thought, I feel comfortable enough that I can figure this out.
Hmm.
And I
The
won't get,
transportation, how to get
yeah,
there,
how
and
to
how
get
to
there, how to
yeah.
get back, mumble my way through enough Japanese to,
Mhm.
whatever. And so the one thing I did do is at the hotel that we were staying at in Fukuoka, I asked the concierge, I pulled her aside and I said, will you be my sensei? And will you help me write out in what's essentially called romanji? So it's like writing out Japanese using English,
Mhm.
our
The
letters, our
alphabet, so you
alphabet.
can read it. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, certain questions like, does this train stop in Karatsu?
The basics,
So,
right?
and what's funny is so many years later, it's still like, Karatsu no tomarimasu ka? Yeah, does this train
Nice.
stop in does it stop in Karatsu is
Okay.
basically all I'm saying there. So anyway, I'm getting ready to go. I've planned my trip and it's just me. I'm good. I've got friends all of a sudden that are like, what are you going to do this Saturday? It's a wide open day. What are you doing this Saturday? And I'm like, oh, I'm going to go to this little festival outside of town. Can I go with you? And I'm like, sure. I'm not going to say no. So I say, sure.
That'd be rude.
But now I'm fearful that now I'm going to be the guide. Well, I'm a guide of one person. Well, pretty soon I'm a guide of 8. There were 8 other people that have been like, or 7 other people and myself that are
Uh-huh.
like, can we go with you?
And
That
these are
sounds
all
really fun.
Oregonians. These are people
These are
from
all
Oregon.
Oregonians that were there for the launch of this inaugural air service. And so I was like, sure. But now I'm kind of freaking out
Okay, but you
because
were a little upset at the time too, because you wanted it to be your experience, or are you happy to bring other people into the fold?
I was scared. I mean, the emotion I felt at the time was fear that I was going to get them lost. I didn't mind getting me lost. I was concerned I might get them lost.
Okay.
And so, um, with my very limited Japanese. So I went to a dear friend of mine who also happened to be the consul general, which means he is the Japanese government's appointee for the Oregon consulate in
Okay. So
Portland.
kind of a big deal.
Kind of a big deal. And I went to him and I'm like, Kano-san, this is going to be a really bizarre favor, but I got to ask you. I was going to do this thing, and now I've got a bunch of people that want to go with me. What are you doing on Saturday? And would you come with me, and will you be my Japanese speaking guide? And he said, for you, Todd, I will do this. And so he came with us. And so now I could relax. And now I'm excited to actually have this band of, we named ourselves the Karatsu 9. And we were traveling to Karatsu for this festival. And we are as it turns out, at the festival, which are basically a series of these big ancient mostly wooden floats being pulled through the streets. There's no motorized anything here because it's being done as it's been done for centuries. Yeah. These are floats are being pulled through the streets by large ropes with the young men in the front and the getting older as you move back closer to the float, all pulling on this rope. And the men that are too old to pull the rope are either riding on the float or walking along behind, playing drums and drinking sake. And as we look up and down the street, I see no other non-Japanese folks on the street. Okay. And they see us. And so as the floats would stop in front of us, we kind of got adopted into the little float brigade, not to pull ropes, but they were putting their happy coats on us. They were giving us their jugs of sake to drink and all this. And we were just enjoying this experience.
This is as authentic as this is what people dream about when they talk about travel.
I kept telling it's not going to be like this everywhere, folks. Just don't, So this, talk about being that accidental immersion, right? And I was loving it. And parade's done. We're walking back through the streets. This is an area that's very well known for some of their pottery. Mm-hmm. We had some people that splintered off. Some went into a little candy store, and others were going into a pottery shop. And I happened to be with that group of folks. And all of a sudden, one of the folks in our group that was not with us at the pottery shop came running into the store, grabs me, and goes, "You've got to come back." I'm like, "Why?" And she goes, "The woman that owns the shop has taken us into this room, taken us upstairs into this massive room with this massive table that's probably like 30 feet long, and it's just laden with food, and she's trying to get us to sit down and eat. And we don't know what it costs. We don't know what we're supposed to do." And I looked at the Kano-san, the consul general is with me, and I look at him and I'm like, "I don't know what's going on, but I think I'm going to need you with me." And so we walk back down the street to the shop. Turns out that the owner of the shop, her husband is the chair of their neighborhood float committee. Okay. All those floats that I mentioned earlier are by neighborhoods. Okay. And so he's the chair of the float committee. All that food is for everybody that worked on pulling the float. She's going to prepare more. She wants us to enjoy. Why? Because unbeknownst to us, they have closed circuit television in Karatsu. And there was a camera pointing right at us, our little band of Oregonians standing on that street corner, the Karatsu 9. And she said, "I watched you on our street enjoying our parade, and you were like little children out there." And so nice. I want you to come into my house and enjoy my hospitality. I want to bring you that.
That's amazing.
And I, again, kept turning to the group going, it is not like this everywhere in Japan. You've really just got to take this in. And so we sat down, then the folks that have been pulling the float all came in, and we wound up in the midst of this raucous feast. And just a lot of energy and laughter, even though they spoke almost no English. None of us, aside from our Japanese-speaking guide, the consul general, spoke any real Japanese
So
to
now he's the
speak of.
translator as well. So
Oh
he
my
went from
gosh,
consulate general
for the
to
whole
guide to
for
translator.
the whole stinking party, you know? And the our hostess comes out, and the consul she wanted to know who was kind of the lead for our group, and the consul general said that it's me. And so I stand up to again thank her profusely, and she's striking up this conversation with me, and she wants to know if I'm married and if I have children. And I said, yes, I have 2 boys. And she goes, do you have pictures of them? And I said, yeah, I do. And so I opened up my wallet and I showed her pictures of my sons.
This
And
is before
she,
smartphones. That's about you didn't have your
oh yeah,
smartphone.
this is before cell phones, folks.
Okay.
Anybody watching, this is pre-cell phone. This is the plastic sleeve
I know what you're
inside the
talking about.
wallet.
I don't know
where
if our
you-
younger viewers
where
like know
you
what you're
keep-
talking about.
Where you keep the picture.
Those like transparent white things where you put
Yes,
pictures in.
yes,
Yeah, I know what
yes,
you're talking about.
that was them. And we, so I show her pictures of the boys, and she compliments me on how handsome the boys are. And I'm like, they get that from their mother. And she goes, oh, I'd like to see a picture of your wife. Well, that little thing in my wallet had broken earlier in the trip. And so I'd thrown most of my pictures, that piece that had broken off, into my briefcase or my
Your
luggage, my
suitcase.
suitcase to take home. So I was flipping through and I realized I didn't have any pictures of Carolyn with me. And so I had to turn to her and go, I'm sorry, I don't have any pictures of my wife. And the consul general starts translating. He's sorry, he has no. And with that, she raises her and backhands me right across the and just start, in Japanese. And the consul general leans forward to me and goes, I'm going to assume I don't need to translate this for you.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I'm really thankful for cell phones now, because I have lots of pictures of my wife, my children, my grandchildren on my phone.
That's amazing. What an experience, though, for everybody involved.
Oh gosh.
Right? And I wonder if that would have happened had it not been 9 of you. If it had just been you by yourself, if you would have ended up. That's interesting. That's when when you talk about travel, or there's this phrase that gets thrown out with like authentic, genuine encounters. That's what you hope for. That's what you dream about, and that's the kind of thing you can't plan.
No.
When do you? We're going to go to this festival, and we're going to be invited into this dinner, and then talking to these people, right?
Yeah.
That would
Well,
never happen,
Yeah, because if you bought that as a package, it would have felt maybe somewhat contrived, right?
Or manufactured.
But
somehow,
yeah, and it is lovely to be invited into a Japanese home, whether it is manufactured or
Right.
organic. But the fact that it was organic, the fact that it happened the way it did, the fact that there were folks in our group that were panicked, that they were, if we eat, is there a bill? What is how
Who's
much is
paying
it?
for
What will
this?
Right. All of that is what made it so incredibly special. And we have folks from that group of Karatsu 9 who had stayed in contact then with our hostess
Yeah.
over the years, and her daughter, about regarding the shop and how they were doing, because they were so touched by all of it that they actually made it a point to be able to stay in contact.
Yeah, that's a great story. Thanks for sharing. There's this idea around festivals where where you go and you see them, observe them, or you participate in them, and it can be, it can kind of turn in this like the tick box, right?
Mhm.
You're like, I need to go see this festival, but it can also be this incredible, genuine way to appreciate their culture, right? You went out of your way, an hour away, outside of your schedule, to go watch this and observe. It's kind of similar to when you learn part of the language.
Mhm.
You're honoring their culture, honoring what they do, and if you do it respectfully, I think I was, as you were telling the story, I was reminded of when I first arrived in Taiwan. The first weekend we were there, and this people that we'd met in Thailand, actually, we ended up at their house, and an American couple. And we got there on a Friday, I think, and on Saturday was Yen Shui. It's this festival in Taiwan, and he's like, you got to come and see it. And I was like, all right, let's go. I don't know what it is, but let's go check it out. And it's this festival where they have these big structures where they are shooting bottle rockets out at people, basically. And you sit there with your back turned to them, and you just take it. And they're shooting bottle rockets at your back, and we have the scooter helmets on with a towel, because you have the towel so that the bottle rockets don't go up into your helmet and blow off your ear, because there's all these stories of injuries and stuff that happen. Before they shoot these bottle rockets out, they have this paper money that you buy, and it's on the ground and you light it on fire. So now you have like fire and smoke coming from the ground, bottle rockets shooting at you from the back. And it was just this incredible festival. It wasn't entirely, there were some Americans or, foreigners observing. Some were, I got in there as well because like, what do we do?
Mhm.
I didn't last very long. You quickly like run out when the smoke kind of fills your helmet. But I often tell, of the things that you're going to do in a foreign country, going and observing these festivals feels less. I don't know how to say this. As you're ticking things off a box, this is one of those things I'm okay ticking off because these are authentic,
Yeah.
traditions that have been around for years,
Mhm.
centuries in some cases. And then if you're lucky, you get invited into into these dinners.
Yeah.
What an incredible,
Yeah.
incredible experience.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much about that story that I appreciate. It's the people that you meet, right?
Mhm.
These encounters that you have with locals that are much more significant, I think, right? I can imagine the responses from the Kurasaki, what is it, the Kurasaki Nine?
Karatsu.
Karatsu, sorry,
Karatsu
Karatsu
9.
Nine. So
Yeah.
what was their response after this experience?
Oh my gosh. Well, like as I had mentioned, some of the folks stayed in touch with our hostess
Okay.
from that day. They figured out a way to get messages translated back and forth so they could email or whatnot, and just kind of stay in touch a little bit afterwards. But you know, when we would find ourselves at events, for years afterwards, it was still kind of that running line about the Karatsu Nine,
Karatsu Nine,
reliving
yes.
reliving our experiences. We were all very heartbroken when our consul general was reassigned, which is not unusual. They change posts, so that had to be part of the send off. When when he left. So the Karatsu Nine had to pay homage to our to our Japanese speaking guide and translator. So who
Yeah.
saved us that
So
day.
what's your take
So
when people come and ask you, I want to have that experience in Japan. Like I want to have this experience when I travel.
you've just got to be I mean you've got to be open to it, but you can't manufacture it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you're not out there, you're not gonna. What we did is created the opportunity for something like that to happen.
Right.
We didn't know it was going to happen, and that made it beautiful. Um, but had we not been open to at least wanting to go to the festival, and being able to stand there on the street, take a train, maybe without our Japanese speaking guide, or we would have still gone. It might have been a much different experience. Who knows?
Yeah.
But you've got to open yourselves up to that,
Yeah.
and that's so that those opportunities can happen.
Yeah, this goes back to like the expectations too, right?
Yeah,
Because now when I travel to Japan, I'm going to be very disappointed if I am not invited into a dinner, and I will
yeah,
take a picture of my wife as well. No, but I think expectations, right? I think
yeah.
you can't force those experiences. You can't be disappointed if and when they don't happen. You have to have your own experience, but you could say, increase the chances that something like that might
Mhm,
happen. As you say, if you put yourself out there, if you go after
mhm,
those experiences,
mhm.
right? As you were talking to, I was reminded of, and I was in Taichung in Taiwan. We were living in Chiayi, my wife and I, but then we traveled to Taichung, it's a city not too far, and we were at a pagoda, an
Mhm.
area with some temples, and all of a sudden a bus showed up with, and it must have been 50 or 60 students, junior hires, that came out and they saw us kind of taking pictures of this temple and white Gordon, which means like white person. And so they came running up and they wanted a picture with me,
Mhm.
and I said, sure, let's do this. So it was like me with 30 other students, doing the poses, and smiling. And I had a great time. I love those encounters. Those are
Yeah.
it was, I think too of shopping for food at a supermarket. And it doesn't happen a lot, but it wasn't uncommon either for a Taiwanese person to kind of observe you and look at what you're
Mm.
buying, the choices that you're making, like you're putting bread in the cart and they're looking at you put the bread in the cart and they're just watching you, looking at you, and some of my friends would get annoyed, because it's a little bit weird. Maybe it feels maybe like the
Mhm.
paparazzi
Mhm.
following you around, right? And I had never minded. I didn't really care. It never really bothered me. Maybe I wasn't there long. I was there for 2 years. Maybe I wasn't there long enough for it to really bother me. I kind of enjoyed it. Sometimes I would, you pull something from the aisle, and you're like, and you're looking at them like this, and then you change
Oh,
your
you're
mind and go
posing.
somewhere
All
else,
right.
like this one, what about this one, it was for me, it was fun, but those encounters, those experiences often would lead to conversations, or they
Yeah.
lead to friendships, or they lead to,
Yeah.
a different kind of encounter,
You
that
know,
that feels a lot more genuine or authentic.
you mentioned the one that you got brought into the photo for the poses, and my my version of that, I guess I would say, was also in Japan. I happened to be in Nagasaki. It was there on business, and it was the it was a Saturday, and I was going to be catching the Shinkansen back to Tokyo to
The high
then
speed
fly
rail.
out. Yeah, and I had been wanting to go visit the Nagasaki Peace Park. It's not as big as the one in Hiroshima, the museum for the dropping of the bomb in Nagasaki, which the Peace Park is built exactly under ground zero. So the museum related to that, all much more modest than the ones in Hiroshima. But I was in Nagasaki and I wanted to go. And so I'm in the park, and like I said, very small, and it's just me.
Mhm.
And I thought, okay, this is good. It's just me. And all of a sudden I hear laughter, children's laughter. And I peek kind of through the hedges, and it's a school group, probably about third grade. All in their school uniforms, couple of teachers, 20 kids. And I'm like, they're on a field trip to this park to understand the history of this place. And I'm the embodiment of that history as an American
Mhm.
in the Nagasaki Peace Park. And I suddenly felt really out of place, really
Like,
awkward.
I gotta get out of
And
here,
this was
kinda.
one of those times that I wasn't sure I wanted to be spotted, be open to.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of, there's got to be another exit from the park. So I could stay over here, and I got spotted. That's bottom line is I was spotted. And the kids started shouting to me. How they picked out that I was an American, Caucasian, yes, but how they just assumed maybe American, I don't know. But that's what they were yelling to me.
Mhm.
Hey, American, hey, American, you know? And so I'm not going to be rude. And so now I'm in. So I walk over to this group, and they are just coming alive. They are
Mhm.
just vibrating. They're so excited that I'm coming over to interact with them. The teachers are smiling. The kids are all smiling. And I know a little bit of Japanese because I had taken a class at Oregon State University with a native Japanese speaking instructor. And so I had taken what they call their business language course, where you get a full semester in 2 weeks. It's like 4 hours a day, and they just hammer you. And it was, for me, it was perfect. And so I knew it just enough to be able to say hello, how are you, whatever. Um, and every time I said a word in Japanese, you would have thought I was throwing candy at them,
Yes.
because they were just so excited by that.
Yes.
And it just suddenly dawned on me, all that fear, all that anxiety about where I was and who I was in this place, um, faded. And
Mhm.
those kids gave me that,
Mhm.
because it was kind of like, that was then.
Mhm.
This is a new day.
Yeah.
We're third graders, you know, and um, really, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
probably. And I remember it like it just, I'm sitting here getting goosebumps
Yeah,
as
yeah.
though it just happened. So,
Yeah. This is what a theme that often comes up with these conversations. It's not the places you go, because in this case you're there to see a particular a place, right, that
mhm,
honors, or
mhm,
that remembers a particularly dark moment in
mhm,
history, right? But the encounter with the people
yeah,
is what transforms that experience, and over. This is what comes out of these conversations. The people that I met, right? The people that I met.
yeah. It's,
That's
it,
yeah.
it's certainly what it's been for me, whether it was in Japan, or excuse me, in Germany, just a few years after the wall came down.
Hmm.
And a colleague from the travel and tourism industry who was raised in East Berlin, had escaped to the West, wanted me to see his side of the town. So one evening, he jumped in his car and he took me over there so I could see East Berlin, dine in an East Berlin restaurant, and see East Berlin from his perspective and hear his stories. Or being in Rwanda just last fall, and the gentleman who was driving me, Patrick, a lovely, lovely man, who knew I also, as part of seeing the city, which he wanted me to do before I jumped on my plane that evening, he wanted to give up his Saturday to drive me and show me his city, and I did tell him that I wanted to make sure I made it to the Genocide Museum. And um, as we were traveling and touring the city before getting to the museum, he let me know that his mother and father were there because it is a mass grave at the Genocide Museum. And it just, I mean, just totally changed my visit to the museum to
Right.
know that this man that during my business trip, because we worked together nearly every day as he drove me, we'd become quite close just because of our conversations. And to now hear that story that his mother and father had been killed in the genocide, he was 12 years old and was the oldest. And therefore, he became the head of his family
At 12 years old.
at 12 years old.
Wow.
And he made sure that his other three siblings made it to school, were able to get to college. He worked so that they could have those experiences. And now, how his siblings recognize his sacrifice and help take care of his family as well. But to
The
tour
siblings
that
went on
museum,
to become doctors and so forth.
a doctor, an accountant, and a lawyer, I believe, were the
Wow.
three. It's like, and so to tour that museum knowing, and memorial, it's not
Yeah.
just a museum, but the museum and the memorial, knowing his parents were there, just totally, again, it was being open, it was
Right.
being
Right.
willing to be vulnerable, and him with me. He didn't need to share that with me, but he felt he could.
Yeah.
Um,
And what a different experience for
what a
you
different
too.
experience for
Yeah.
me. In fact, they have the option as you enter that particular museum and memorial that for a small donation you can get a headset so that you get the audio. You don't just have to read the interpretive signage and such as you navigate the museum and the memorial. But for an additional, you can also you can also receive a rose that you can lay on the graves as a testament. And that just felt right,
Mhm.
in honor of Patrick, in honor of his sacrifice, in honor of his parents.
Yeah.
I just felt like the right thing to do. But would I have done that had I not met Patrick and heard his story? I still wanted to go to the museum. I had heard how moving it was, how hard it was to understand what happened there.
Yeah.
But again, it's being open
Yeah.
and being
Yeah.
vulnerable.
And again, how that interpersonal relationship, how friendship transforms a location.
Yeah.
Right. I was in Croatia not too long ago, and same thing. We did a tour in Zagreb of the old, kind of the underground places where they hid when the war broke out, and our guides were, in one case the daughter, and in another case the grandson of people who had suffered and in some cases died as a result of the war, and to hear that, that kind of sort of post memories or that experience, that interpersonal or the specific experience that they had as a family, it's so much more impactful, right? Well, thank you so much. It's been fantastic to hear your stories of chance encounters with people in Japan, the more sort of humorous side of things, but also on a serious note with some of those encounters with some darker parts of our history. It is time to spin the
All
globe.
right.
So let's see where we land. And these chance encounters. Was that France?
Yeah.
I didn't see. France. Have you been to France?
I've been to France.
Tell me about France.
I've been to France. It's always been business. So
Talking like Paris? Are we talking outside Paris?
it's well, actually, you're right. I should correct myself because it was both on business, but also as a 19-year-old, because I'm a drummer.
Okay.
And had played drums since I was 11, and was picked to perform in a symphonic concert band by Purdue University. They brought together 100 high school students from across the country, brought us to.
So you're a good drummer. You're not just a drummer. You're
Well,
selected.
at least my director thought I was good enough that he would nominate me for this, and then they heard my tape and whatnot, and invited me to do this. And so we met up in New York, practiced for a week together, performed at the Lincoln Center, and then flew out to Europe and toured Europe for for 5 weeks,
That's amazing.
and had the opportunity for that was my first trip to Paris and little bit outside of Paris because we had a chance to go out and see the Palace at Versailles.
Okay.
But otherwise, we were in Paris and performed there. It was actually it was a bit of a we performed outside the Montmartre.
Mhm.
So if you know the big church, top of the big steps,
Yeah.
um, again, great people story. I'll keep it super brief because, but I had left my passport in my hotel room in La Chaux-de-Fonds, Switzerland, and was able to get into France without it. That may tell you something. It was 1977, so maybe things were a little different then. But I was able to get into France without a passport from Switzerland. But I was told there's no way. The next stop was England, and it's like there's no way you're going to get into England from France without a passport, which may tell you something also. But anyway, so I had to take part of a day when the group was going on a tour to go to the embassy and get a new passport. And I was traveling smart. I had an extra photo. I had my birth certificate,
Good.
so I was ready to go. And it was quick, but I missed the tour with the group, but I now had to meet up with them for the concert. Well, our concert uniforms are black tuxedos with the American flag on them and a big patch that says U.S. Symphonic Wind Bands. That's what I'm wearing on the streets of Paris as I get on the subway to go to the Montmartre. And I'm just told, get off the subway, walk up the stairs, you'll see the big church. So I got off the subway, exactly where I was told to, walked up the stairs, no church. I'm standing in this charming little square, but no church. And so I walk into a restaurant. I figure, okay, hopefully somebody here will speak English. The people that greeted me know English. They go find somebody that speaks English. I'm sitting here trying to gesture. I'm looking for a church. So I'm like praying. I'm doing whatever I can to. And
They
they
start
thought,
joining you in prayer too.
so,
Okay, let's
well,
pray.
actually, they wanted to feed me. They thought I was like saying that I wanted to offer grace. I needed
Nice.
food. So and I'm like, no. I said, my black tuxedo bow tie. Oh, you got the picture. And it's like, can you, I'm trying to find the Montmartre. And they're like, and finally this woman comes out of the kitchen and she's the only one that spoke enough English to understand what I was saying. I'm looking for the church. And she's like, oh, walk up this alley. You'll go about 50 yards, look to the left, you'll see and sure enough, she was spot on,
Okay.
So that's how I made it. But again, those chance interactions
Yes.
with people. I will always remember that quaint little restaurant in that lovely little square, and eventually find them.
So you must have gotten off at the subway stop was correct. You just got off on the wrong exit because there's different exits in
Yep.
one subway spot.
Yep.
That's what I was envisioning. Yeah.
Yep. Chose the wrong flight of stairs. Right exit or right subway stop, wrong exit.
Yeah.
So
That's great. Yeah, growing up in Spain, we went to France all the time, so I have lots of stories of France. But one of my favorite was recently my daughter, my oldest daughter. She became obsessed with Paris for some reason. No, I don't know how these things happen because we don't talk about France a whole lot. But somehow she must have read something or heard something, and she became obsessed. So on our last trip to Spain, we just happened to fly with Air France, and there was a layover in Paris. So we worked it out with the airlines. Let's spend an extra day in Paris. So we get to Paris, and I say, we're going to go to the Eiffel Tower, and then we're going to be done with Paris and never come back again. So sure enough, we show up, jet-lagged, exhausted, tired. Nobody wants to go up the Eiffel Tower, but I dragged my family, and I said, we're doing this. We sat in line, or we stood in line. It was hot. Even my wife was saying, what if we just take a picnic over there and take a picture? And I was like, no. We stood in line. We went up the Eiffel Tower. We came down. So now the rule is my daughter, whenever she says that she's been to the Eiffel Tower, she has to say thanks to Papa. But I think, we spent some time in the French Riviera, of course. It's beautiful, a wonderful, wonderful location. Well, thank you so much. It's been great chatting about chance encounters with people, about traveling, as we often do, encourage our listeners to travel, to see the world, to explore, to experience, and to be safe most of the time.
Always. Yeah. Thank you, David. It was an absolute pleasure to just be able to sit here and reminisce with you. So thank you for the opportunity.